Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast, plus the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in. But first, the obvious. Nick and Stabby aren't here. We were told bodies were being hidden, not to ask too many questions, so we're going to move on. Has nothing to do with that missing person report. Just saying. All right, and with that, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves. And since I can read the alphabet, I'm going to use that. And Miss Hunter K Wallace, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Yeah, eventually I learned the alphabet too. Hi, I'm Hunter K Wallace. I write the Migratory Farmers series, which is a really wacky fantasy with adventure and romance. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we have the mini personalities of Jana S Brown.
Wait, where? Who? Oh, me. Right. I'm Jana S Brown. I know, one of my many me's. I'm Jana S Brown. I also write speculative fiction under the pen name Jena Rey. I write urban fantasy, science fiction, fantasy. I write the weird and the wonderful, generally with smoochies.
There you go. All right. Yes, next, we have Mr. Jesse James Fain with no smoochies. No smoochies for you, Jesse.
I'm kind of okay with that. Everybody. My name is Jesse James Fain. I write science fiction, fantasy, mill sci-fi. I write martial tales, anything that's got a fist fight, a gunfight, or any other kind of fight that you can imagine. It's probably going to come from me. I like specializing in revenge tales. And I actually do very much enjoy the concept of the nomad singular. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Wow, freaking standing. Next, we have the one, the only, Mr. Michael J. Allen. Woohoo!
Hey guys, I'm Michael J. Allen, and today I'm ironically a Star-Lord professional goofball and a USA Today best-selling author of the full spectrum of science fiction and fantasy.
Wow, freaking standing. And last, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Shane Gries.
Hi, I'm Shane. Just retired after 35 years in the Army, in the infantry. And now I've translated all that experience into writing military science fiction and recently military zombie apocalypse novels. Having a blast.
But isn't military and zombie the same thing?
Sometimes.
Well, sometimes it is.
Largely around the Pentagon, it gets that way.
It absolutely is.
All right. And now, because we are the Blasters and Blades podcast, first I have to tell you how I first found them. We actually met at a Book Buyers Anonymous, and then we decided we didn't want to be no quitters, so we just went and bought more books. You're welcome.
Woo!
I've noticed that I buy a lot more books than I ever have time to read. I think the people that buy the books and read the books, they're like a Venn diagram that kind of overlaps, but not all the way.
Yeah, it's two different hobbies. Buying books is one hobby, reading books is another hobby, and sometimes the two overlap.
Oh yeah, sometimes. My hobby is putting them on hold at the library on my reading app, and then when they come to me, I schedule out for 2 more weeks. No, I'll have time eventually, and then I pick something I really want to read, but I can't take it off my list.
That's how you do it, and because this is spooky season when you'll be listening to this, although we're recording it in the heat of August, or at the end of it anyway. If you go to Lowe's, they have this really cool design or spooky season display that looks like old leather-bound books that at irregular intervals will just pull forward like a ghost is pulling on them and then pop back when you walk close to it. So if you're a book nerd and you like spooky season, you definitely have to go there and check those out. I saw them on their website. So scare a new friend, So, all right. And now the religion questions. Casper, the Addams Family, or Goosebumps? Jesse.
Definitely going to have to go with Addams Family for me. I think Gomez and Morticia, especially as I get older, are the perfect example of how a couple should be. And I just enjoy the idea of the odd family dynamic. I grew up in a really chaotic household that did allow for a lot of creativity. So it feels homey to me. If that makes sense.
All right, Jana, what about you? Casper, the Addams Family, or Goosebumps?
Oh, it's a total Addams Family thing. I agree. Gomez and Morticia are adorable. I particularly love the 90s version with Angelica Houston. That is my very, very favorite version.
Okay. Shane, what about you?
Oh, yeah. Addams Family. I think I got hooked on it when I was a kid, when I was watching the reruns from the 60s. Absolutely loved it. Then later, obviously, I've discovered the other iterations of it, the original comics, obviously the movies in the 90s, and then this latest iteration. I love them all. They're a lot of fun. So, yeah, definitely Addams Family.
All right. Did you like the Wednesday episodes that they're series that they did, the offshoot?
Yeah, I kind of. It's probably my least favorite version, but still like that one too.
All right. What about you, Michael? Are you going to go with the flow, or are you going to be a wild card, be an adventurer, pick something else?
Well, I'm gonna have to go with the flow, and for a little different reasons. I mean, I love obviously John Astin and Raul Julia both did incredible but separate versions of Gomez. But to be honest, I mean, Uncle Fester, I mean, he's pretty much the same as everybody I'm related to. So absolutely got to go with the Addams Family for Fester.
Okay. What about you, Hunter?
Michael stole mine. I mean, I love the Addams Family for Uncle Fester because sometimes I feel like I'm just a little bit Uncle Fester. Like, oh man, I need to go do this important adult thing. I don't know. I mean, I'll try, but nothing coherent's gonna come out.
Okay, so for me, it's gonna definitely
the scene where like he's pretending to be a walrus in one of the movies with like chopstick up his nose.
I can appreciate the childishness. So for me, I'm definitely going Goosebumps, just because when I think Goosebumps, I think back to the Scholastic book fairs and the little paper that's so thin if you sneeze at it, it's going to like shred, but you could order all the books. And inevitably, your wish list when you're going through the sheet was always longer than your wallet would allow for. So you ended up having like, which one do I really want? Which teaches kids good like mathematical reasoning skills. I think we should bring them back. But so for me, Goosebumps, because, you know, it's a taste of childhood.
Well, life would be better if it was a Scholastic book fair.
I mean, I just want Pizza Hut to do the reading challenge that they used to do for kids and do it for adults.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
I mean, all those personal pan pizzas.
For my kid.
What's that?
They do it for my kid. The only problem is we go to Pizza Hut and then they get a pizza and I don't have a pizza.
That's true. I miss it when you go inside with the old iconic design. Like they can try to turn those buildings into other things, but you could tell it was a Pizza Hut. And they had the salad bar and the pizza buffet long before CC's was a thing. I remember those. Yeah. That's how you could try a lot of really weird pizzas because they would always mix it up. So, all right, I'm going to make
at least one arcade game.
And at least, yeah, actually, they always had one or two arcade games as well. And because we're polytheistic, Hocus Pocus, Halloween Town, or Beetlejuice. Jesse.
Beetlejuice of those picks. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the others a lot. But Beetlejuice fits my humor a little bit better. And I watched it a lot as a kid growing up. Hocus Pocus was kind of creepy as a child. But Beetlejuice, for some reason, just made me laugh more.
Okay. What about you, Jana?
Nightmare Before Christmas. I reject your list and I substitute my own.
I would consider Nightmare Before Christmas more of a Christmas movie, but we'll allow it.
I consider it both. I'm perfectly fine to watch it starting about October 1st all the way through December 31st, and that brings me my happies.
All right, we'll allow it. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Beetlejuice. I'm a kid of, I grew up in the 80s, I get a little nostalgic. I'm really stoked that the new one's coming out here pretty soon. I might actually go out into the movies and go see this one, which is a departure from the norm for me.
Wow, you must be rich. It's like $100 to go to the movies now.
I know. That's how excited I am about it.
No, I appreciate it. Once I had Halloween Town and Hocus Pocus, the reason Stabby suggested Beetlejuice was because we knew the second one was coming out. So it made it relevant again. Okay, what about you, Michael? Hocus Pocus, Halloween Town, or Beetlejuice?
Say it once, say it twice. Third time's a charm. Beetlejuice is the ghost with the most.
Okay. Excellent choice. I like that one too. And that book about, how to act when you died. I forget the name of the book in the show or in the movie, but you see the memes where people buy them and like place them in loved ones' bedrooms to mess with them. And then when they throw them away, they like soak it in water and keep putting it back to mess with them. Like the book just keeps reappearing. Because I would totally do that. I would totally do it though, Jana. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, I know you would, but yeah, that's mean.
All right. What about you, Hunter?
Hocus Pocus, because I'm immature and I still giggle in my head every time the little girl asks her brother, "What's a virgin?"
And the answer in the show was, it's someone who lights the candle. In the second movie, that was the answer. They're sitting in the shop and they're like doing the tours now of this house. They've reopened it. And this little girl asks, "What's a virgin?" And the sister just looks at the brother and he's like, "It's someone who lights the candle."
Nice.
But yeah, I liked Hocus Pocus too. Hocus Pocus also. I liked that it like this generally you're going to sacrifice a virgin. It's always a female, right? And this one kind of inverted that by having him be the virgin, and that was kind of the butt of the joke. I like the way it ended, and the bullies got their comeuppance a little bit. I just thought it was kind of wholesome as well. Like as someone who has sisters, it's nice to see that relationship shown where they aren't trying to murder each other. I mean,
everybody else.
Right. I mean, sure, there are moments when you definitely do want to, beat them about the head and shoulders. But I'm a sucker for anything that shows a wholesome family. So even at the end of the world.
Even then.
All right. Now we've had you all on the show at least once, so we know what your favorite dinosaurs are. So I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite zoo animal? Jesse.
It's a really hard answer for me. I have a whole Jungle Book sleeve that, for anyone watching, can probably see the little pieces of. So it bounced back and forth between wolves and tigers. Those have always been my favorite ever since I was a child. So that's gonna be my picks.
Okay. What about you, Jana?
I'm split between tigers and red pandas because up at our zoo, we have the cutest little red pandas and you just want to squish them. But we also have this giant male tiger who has not been fixed. So there's big signs on the enclosure that says, if you get too close, he will spray you. And we are not responsible for any of that. And you always see some idiot over there that's poking at the tiger, and the tiger lifts his leg and does what he does. And you'll get these teenagers going, "Oh, dude, it's so gross. I can't get the smell off." And it's like, "Oh yeah, you deserve that, honey. That was just made my day all over." So I have a soft spot for that particular tiger because he knows what he's there for.
All right. What about you, Shane? Favorite zoo animal?
Yeah, so I was up in Queensland, Australia, north of Cairns, and we went to the zoo, and I saw this gigantic saltwater croc, and I thought, that thing is amazing. It made alligators look, tiny in comparison. These things, they lurk in the ocean, they lurk in the rivers, they're ambush predators. They're like a dinosaur. They're almost like my favorite dinosaur. These things can swim from Australia to Indonesia, where, fun fact, in Indonesia and some of the villages, they worship these things and won't harm them, even though they kill and eat like 800 or 900 villagers a year in southern Indonesia.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. So, yeah, saltwater croc, my favorite zoo animal.
All right. What about you, Michael?
I really want to say platypus, but the reality is I much prefer the hawks and the falcons.
Okay. All right. What about you, Hunter? Favorite zoo animal?
Okay, we're gonna scale down. The naked mole rat.
Go on.
They are super weird, and they're either one of the only or the only mammal that has a queen.
Okay.
Well, there we go.
Like ants. But it's a rat.
Just learned something new today.
So if you like,
that's waiting to be a messed up sci-fi story.
Yeah. So they have, if you like crocodiles, Shane, they had an episode on Primeval, which is like where there's the anomalies and the animals from back in time come in. And that is to explain all the cryptids. It's just animals that are out of time and then they disappear and they go back home. But they had one where the crocodile came and it expected to be worshipped because I guess the Egyptians of a certain era did. And it didn't know what to do when they just didn't bring it food. So they ended up pushing it home, obviously, because that's the point of the show. But if you like crocodiles, you should check that episode out of Primeval.
I guess I have to.
It's totally worth it. So for me, I guess my favorite zoo animal, I used to would have told you, like I've said, polar bears and wolves before, so we won't go with those. At one point in time, I would have told you camels look kind of cool because I watched Lawrence of Arabia and they had camels in it. But having met camels in real life, they're mean, they smell, they spit at you, they try to bite you. They're just bad creatures.
Camels are assholes.
They are. So I remember when I was at the Indianapolis Zoo, they had the dingoes. And I just remember somebody, inevitably when we'd go there, someone would be like, a dingo ate my baby. And I don't know why I thought that was funny, but I always did. So dingo.
The Aussies don't think that's funny, but yeah.
Is that where that came from?
Oh, yeah. Dingoes are from Australia.
I just remember the line because it stuck out in my head because everyone did it with weird accents that I couldn't tell if they were trying to be Russian or English because they were so bad.
Yeah. No, I spent 5.5 years posted in Australia, so I got to have some unique experiences down there. But I never did see a dingo eat a baby, so that's one thing I didn't get to experience.
Okay. What about kangaroos? Did you see any kangaroos out in the wild?
Oh shit! I had them living across the street from our apartment. We'd look out the window and see kangaroos. This thing, and
nice.
They would, when it got dry, they were always looking for grass to eat. So they would mob out on the golf courses in Canberra. I was in Canberra, the national capital. And, you're out there golfing and the kangaroos are out there eating grass on the fairways. It was pretty interesting. But
my favorite kangaroo video is the one where it was trying to attack the dog and the owner gets right in front of the dog and starts boxing the kangaroo. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I understand there was some backlash for the guy, but I mean, you got to save your dog, right? Like that's just a given. So
yeah, of course. Kangaroos are dumber than shit anyway.
That I did not know.
The highways are littered with kangaroo carcasses because anytime they see a car, they jump out in front of it and get hit and killed.
Right.
You drive from Canberra to Sydney, and the whole 3-hour drive is nothing but dead kangaroos and dead wombats on the side of the road.
What about emu? You seen any of those?
Seen any what?
Emu?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I only saw those in Western Australia when I was out near Perth. We took a road trip north of Perth up the coast, I was driving down the road, and 6 of them came out of the ditch and came across us. Right in front of me. I'd locked up the brakes. Didn't hit any of them, but it was a close one.
I mean, isn't the war still declared? So you should be good.
No, the war's over. The Australians lost. So the emus declared victory and went home. So it's all good.
Okay. Works for me. We should declare war on an animal here in the U.S. just so we can say the Australians aren't better than us. Let's think about it. We can brainstorm later which animal we want to declare war on, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good.
One we can win, so we don't have to lose like the Aussies did. Sorry, Max, I know you're listening, but oops. All right, and because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it during this spooky season? Jesse?
I have a severe aversion to coffee that is explained on my Substack.
For anybody that is interested, I'm not going to get into that now. So it's hot chocolate for me, especially here in spooky season.
Okay. What about you, Jana?
Well, those who have listened before know that I am a fast and firm Dr. Pepper gal, but during spooky season, I like plum cider that's all spiced up and has cinnamon, all the good things in it, and so we bottle plums and plum juice, and then we warm that up, and it's really, really good.
Now, I've had apple cider and mulled apple cider, but I didn't know plum cider was even a thing. So can you make a cider out of any vegetable or any fruit?
Well, just about. And it depends. It's plum juice. We call it cider because it's not technically correct, but it sounds better than plum juice. Plum juice sounds like something old people drink to make their stomachs work better. So we warm it up, we add spices to it, and we call it plum cider, even though there's not a drop of alcohol in it. You could make it alcoholic if you wanted to, but
apple cider doesn't have to have alcohol in it.
Yes, and that's a difference between do you really want to get into? So cider has a certain percentage of solids that are still in it, and juice has been strained down so that you get a different level of clarity. And so ours really would be plum cider, but a lot of people hear cider and all they think of is hard cider, which is your alcoholic cider. There, we'll get into all sorts of weird technicalities.
And to answer that, you can make a cider out of almost anything except for citrus. Especially if we're talking about fermentation, when citrus ferments, it turns into like wet sock, like gym sock flavor. It's terrible. As a home brewer, I can tell you I've been down that road, and it's absolutely awful. So as long as you're not doing mango or orange, you can make a cider out of almost anything.
Jesse, this might be the time we do the intervention. Why are you drinking gym socks?
It wasn't on purpose.
It tasted like pee.
Okay. All right. Shane, what are you drinking during this spooky season?
Well, I always like my coffee with a little whiskey. During the spooky season, maybe the same thing, except without the coffee.
That works. All right. What about you, Michael?
Not to be confused with butterbeer, but hot buttered rum.
Okay, go on. Tell us more.
Which is something I got from a diner in my childhood.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Jerry?
So what goes into that rum?
It's really basically creamy butterscotch is what it amounts to. So there's not
trying that if it shows up sometime.
So, it's butter and cream and again, butterscotch. I got it as a kid, so there wasn't any alcohol in it.
Okay. All right. What about you, Hunter? Are you going to go with the
My answer is I want what Michael gets.
That works. All right. So for me, I don't know. I like the way like apple cider smells. It brings back vivid memories as a child going to some of the historic places because, I live on the East Coast, so we got Williamsburg. If you go there in the winter, inevitably they've got the spiced apple drinks that they'll give you to keep you warm while you're doing the tours and learning about the old people that, came way before our parents. So I like the way it smells. I just wish I liked the way it tasted. But I do mix up the coffee with peppermint hot chocolate sometimes.
Oh, love peppermint hot chocolate. And brown coffee, peppermint hot chocolate is really, really good.
Yeah, I like to
plug in there for our supporter.
Absolutely. When we do it in the season with the kids, we actually let them stir it up, but we give them a candy cane stick to stir it up with. Nice. And sometimes the local Kroger will have the candy cane stick that's a straw as well. So that could be fun. We did that for the first time last year and it worked. But my mustache has come completely in since then, and I don't know how that's going to work because I'm afraid like it would get stuck, and that would be a little painful and awkward to clean. So I might have to just stick with drinking it the old-fashioned way. But the kids loved the candy cane straw. So, all right. And now that we got that out of the way and had way too much fun talking about ruining our diets, you're welcome. We're going to talk about the topic that brought us here. So nomads in speculative fiction. So anybody can jump right in, but what makes someone a nomad in your eyes? Because do they have to be in a group? Do they go single? Do they need a wagon? Can they go on foot? Like what makes a nomad? Anybody want to go first?
Well, someone who has any...
Go ahead, Michael. You were talking. It's good. It's good.
Pretty much any character or group of characters that don't have a dedicated home base. And when I mean home base, I mean a stationary home base. Because obviously a Battlestar is a home base, but they're still nomads.
I like that. It's succinct. Covers all the bases. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Or are we going to give Michael his gold star today?
That was it.
Gold star.
Perfect.
Well, though I would say that they may not have a stationary home base, though they may have oft visited places. Because when you think like desert nomads and things like that, there are an oasis, for example, is a place they might return to. So they wouldn't necessarily build a city there, but they will sometimes have a route that they're following because they know that, gosh, when it gets cold, go that way because it will be much, much nicer. So they will have locations that they may revisit, but they don't settle those places. They don't stay there. They don't build stuff, but they may have routes that they visit again. That would be the only teeny tiny tweak I'd put in.
like caravans. You go along the trade route, eventually you turn back and you go again.
Yeah. So what would you classify the peoples that travel from location to location based on a season, where they might be a camp here in the winter season, a camp here in the spring? Would that be nomadic or just rotational living?
I would call that nomadic. The original nomadic, again, if we're going off of kind of a history basis, is the either following of a seasonal change or the herds of animals, or however humans had to orient their lives to be able to have the resources that they needed, or in places like the Sahara, where water is a constant concern. One way or another, that's the origin of people living as nomads, is chasing those resources down. So I think, yeah, that still counts as a nomad, even if it's a caravan trader that's constantly on the move, or my personal favorite singular nomad, Conan the Barbarian, who traveled on a whim more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, Native Americans, a lot of those tribes were nomadic, following the herds of animals as the seasons change, but they would cover the same ground year after year, but they pick up and move.
In some places like Central Asia, there still are some nomads, like people whose life revolves around their horses.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is, go ahead.
It's just interesting that their whole lives are set up to be able to move. Like the nomads of Central Asia live in yurts, because it's an awesome stable home, and then you can pack it up over the course of a day or two, move it, set it up over the course of a day or two.
And you get to drink fermented, horse milk, which I think is pretty cool.
And yak milk. But I think that's one of those keys, is that the idea of nomads is usually people who bring home with them. Conan had home wherever he happened to be. With a caravan, home is the wagon. If you're talking about spaceships, I mean, Firefly is a very nomadic kind of show, because they didn't have a home they were going to, even though they stopped at places. Home was Serenity, and wherever Serenity was, they were home, and it didn't matter within the rest of the verse what everything else was. They were just places they stopped by, but home was what they took with them. And you see a lot of that with all of our different kinds of nomads. They take that feeling of home, that feeling of family, those kinds of things, and it's wherever they are, that's home that goes with them.
Okay.
And Jane had a cool hat.
Jane had a very fetching hat.
And he got to get a lot of sleep because he was always going to his bunk.
It's true. Lots of sleep.
Is that what that was about?
Sure.
Absolutely. He was a very tired man.
Okay, so just because it's a natural stopping point and we went a little bit longer on the introduction, having way too much fun, it's probably illegal at this point in the world. We're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly show for the man, and then we're going to jump right back in. So give me just a second to pull that commercial up.
Atlanta cabbie by day, amateur auto duelist by night. Ricky Turner is living the dream. That is, until he wakes up in a Gold Cross facility to discover his last match was more than a failure. It was a fatality. Indebted for the cost of the clone body and reboot, Ricky heads back to the arena to do the one thing he knows how to do: drive offensively. But at the rate amateur matches pay out, it'll take several lifetimes to pay his debt. Luckily, the AADA has announced a new nationwide road rally designed to challenge even the hardiest of auto-dueling teams. Dead Man's Run. Can Ricky and his clandestine crew traverse the wasteland from Atlanta to Sturgis, survive against packs of cannibals, roving biker gangs, and amateur auto-duelists out to make a name for themselves? Welcome to the world of the Car Warriors Auto-Duel Chronicles. Tales from the freeways of the future, where the right-of-way goes to the biggest guns and death sports rule the airwaves. From clandestine highway battles to primetime arena combat, jump behind the wheel, follow the fast-paced action, and never forget to drive offensively. Burning Roads, Dead Man's Run Book 1 by William Joseph Roberts, narrated by Joshua Saxon, available from Three Ravens Publishing on Amazon and anywhere books are sold.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. It's the closest commercial we had that had people traveling. So for the nomad topic. So we just kind of went with it. With that out of the way, so we've talked about what a nomad is and some examples of it. What is it about that kind of character arc, that character that makes it so appealing?
I think one facet of it that's really interesting is the adventure. That today looks like one thing, but tomorrow we could be somewhere new. We could have a new location. We could have a new culture around us, a new magic, a new technology to play with.
Okay.
One that I think of, I guess one that I really like is the Tuathuan in the Wheel of Time, where they're a really neat nomadic culture. They fix people's stuff, and I guess I just really like them. They're cool people, but
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, so I've been writing some apocalyptic stuff lately, and most of the apocalypse stories have to do with somebody trying to travel a great distance to get somewhere else, right? It's kind of the trope. But yeah, they run into different, problems, different peoples, different issues, different struggles. And you can create many, many stories because they're moving to new places. They're running into different problem sets. They're having to figure out different things, interacting with different people. Sometimes they lose people along the way. Sometimes they pick up new people. And it changes the dynamic between the characters. But yeah, I think the nomadic, sort of storyline is rich for, telling different tales. And I think you can mine that all day long.
Yeah. Well, for a society that's basic. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead. For a society that's basically programmed to settle, the idea of the open road holds a huge romantic allure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the Old West, people going off into the frontier and these wagon trains and running into all kinds of stuff that whether it be Mother Nature and getting snowed into a pass and running out of food, or running into bandits along the way, or whatever. There's
dysentery.
Dysentery.
Oregon Trail.
Yeah, so that's what I always think of when I think of nomads. I always go back to Oregon Trail and playing that crappy computer game on the old elementary school computer lab when we had to sacrifice robots to get online back in the day. And I always, when I think nomads, I'm always picturing the Oregon Trail, which is obviously very American centric because it's in America. But
right,
so, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that could apply in space or in a fantasy. And because we recently interviewed Hunter, it was her series about nomadic gardeners, essentially, that inspired the topic. But it got me thinking, because you see, any Battlestar Galactica Voyager type tale, they're essentially nomads trying to get home. So obviously, it doesn't have to just be fantasy or historical fantasy. So. But do you think it matters if they're nomadic as a way of life, like the Indians or the Mongolians, or can it be a temporary situation as they search for a new home in an apocalypse?
Well, I'm writing a series right now that is exactly that, right? So I think so. Obviously, home just went up. They got to go somewhere else. They have a place they intend to go, and they run into adventures along the way. So, yeah, I think so.
But it is a little bit different because when you're a temporary nomad, you are seeking for a home place. You're seeking for a place you can go and you can settle. When we're talking about a little bit more classic nomads, that's not the point. It's not the point to go and settle somewhere else. The point is in the movement, and it creates a completely different culture and a completely different way of thinking because you're living outside of walls. It is not safe. And that I've got the fantasy series that I wrote has a nomadic culture in it. And part of the problem for them is that at night, the undead wake up and they wander around and they kill people. And for them, there are no walls to keep the undead out. So their culture had to come up with different ways to connect to faith, to connect to power, to connect to the things that keep them safe from the undead. And it's completely and utterly different from other places that say, well, we put up really, really thick walls and we hide behind them. And that's a different mentality. You come at things differently when you say, this is the freedom we desire, and we will embrace that freedom over the safety of being able to go behind walls. And so there's a huge cultural difference there. And I think that's a different way of thinking than somebody who says, our walls have fallen down, we are searching for new walls. They're still nomads. I agree with that. But I do think you get kind of a difference in the way that shapes their culture, because they're not looking for home. Home is already there, and they live that way. They're not looking for walls to go to. They're not looking for a new place. That they are who they are, and that is all part of what their culture is, who they are as a crew, any of those things where they say home is with us, not where we're going to.
So and I can't not hammer the walls thing home enough. The toughness and resourcefulness that is required when you don't live behind a solid wall between, because that's what we do almost everywhere in modern life now, is you have a house that has a big, thick, solid wall that keeps the wild animals and everything else out, even keeps the weather out, keeps the temperature out. We're air conditioned, we're protected whenever we sleep in this one spot. And deciding that you're going to spend the vast majority of your life into old age unprotected, that you're going to go out there and no matter what happens, you have to keep moving and you have to find new resources and you have to protect yourself, is a whole nother level of living life. It's living life on hard mode.
I think there are basically three kinds of nomads. There are ones that there are nomadic, wagon trains that are constantly on the move, picking up their house and going someplace to follow the herds. Then you've got the nomads that are going towards something, and then the nomads that are wandering because they don't know where to be.
I've got a question for you guys. What do you think about something like circuses? Do you feel like they have a place to fit into under the definition, or no?
I would consider
traveling circuses.
Traveling circuses, traveling carnivals, they're nomads as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Yes, we should write novels about carnies.
There's a really good one. It's called The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstein.
Oh, nice.
Amazing. Really, really good.
They did there was a TV series about a female succubus that was like, I can't remember the name. It was on Sci-Fi when they actually did sci-fi stuff instead of just ghost hunting. But they actually had a traveling zoo carnival kind of thing. So it's been done in urban fantasy. I know I've seen that where it's like hiding the vampires or whatever. And if you are eating people, it's a good way to, dispose of any bodies, because you capture them in City A and you drop the body at City B after you fed, and it makes it easy to cover your tracks if you're trying to be an ancient being existing in the modern world.
It's good for variety too. You don't want to get stuck eating the same people every day.
They all start tasting the same, like chicken.
I mean, if mosquitoes can taste if we've had onions, I assume vampires can too.
Absolutely.
Mosquitoes can taste if we've had onions?
I've heard that they're less likely to bite you if you eat a lot of onions. Maybe that's an old wives' tale.
I've heard with mosquitoes that it was if you had certain blood types, they would eat you, they would bite you more, but I didn't hear anything about onions. Interesting. All right, so back to nomads. So how does, and this came up in my discussion with you, Hunter, but how do you think culture would be different if you're talking about someone who grew up in a nomadic, permanently so, tribe versus someone who grew up with the safety of a city and then now they're just moving or becoming nomads? Because you covered that a little bit in your series, Hunter.
I do. I like Jenna's thought about how your culture shapes you. Like in my series, my main character, she does not like chairs. Like someone gives her a chair and she's going to shove that crap away. No, because it doesn't fit within her worldview of, why do I need this? This isn't who I am. I want to sit on the ground. So it can affect even little things.
Well, it affects so many basic things, because it's like Shane said at one point, what you eat when you are nomadic is phenomenally different from what you eat when you are allowed to set down roots and become an agricultural society where you plant crops and you rotate things and because even things like grain and bread and stuff that we think of all the time is, anytime you have an adventurer's pack, what kind of things are going to be in it? Apples, moldy cheese, hardtack, blah, 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 blah. A lot of those things don't work for a nomadic society. Where the heck are they getting the apples unless they happen to pass through someplace where there are apples, because they are not sitting down and planting their apple trees and waiting for 5 years for them to produce. That doesn't happen. And so they eat a lot of meat, they eat a lot of milks and butters, they eat grains and tubers, but it's the kind of thing, and berries, but it's the kind of thing of, we stopped here.
And fermented
Whatever
horse
you
milk.
can find in the next few hours, that's dinner for the next several days. Fermented horse meat, jerkies, because you can actually make jerky. You tuck the meat in as you travel, and it'll dry out, and you pound salts and other stuff into it. So there's a lot of stuff there, but it totally changes what you eat. It changes how you sleep. It changes all of those things. So a city is so foreign to them in the same way that a city dweller coming out is going to go, well, what do you mean that the only thing there is to eat is this bowl of milk with meat chunks in it, and that's breakfast? Are we supposed to have oatmeal or grain or pottage or any of those things? It's like, no, this is what we eat. It's milk and yak bits. I don't want to eat yak bits. Tough rocks.
So let me ask you this then, as a follow-up to that. If you use a fantasy world where you've got the Roman legion as an example, every time they traveled, they were certainly, when they were on the march, nomadic, but every night they stopped, they built a base. Would they qualify then as nomadic? Because every night they're sleeping in a city.
Well, it's like a bivouac, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
they're temporarily nomadic. They had a home to go back to that they would go back to. I think a lot of armies and stuff, we send them out to do a thing. That's not home. That's not, we're choosing to live this lifestyle. That is, we're going out to conquer people, and eventually we're going to go home to where our families and our kids and all of the other stuff.
But while they're not home, they are nomadic. And even if you take out
temporarily nomadic, yeah.
If you take out, they've got the home base. If they were literally just a wandering army, the fact that they would build a fort every night, would that take away their nomad status then? Because they've got walls every night. It just moves as they move.
So,
well, you can have a yurt every night too.
I think it's interesting. There's a historical story. What was Cynthia Ann Parker? She grew up in Texas in the early 19th century, and she was captured after a Comanche raid. So she grew up in a family of settlers. They had built basically a fort. The Comanche came in and then just basically murdered almost everybody in her family, and then captured the kids. And she along with a couple of her siblings, I think, were very young, were raised by the Comanche. And so her identity was Comanche. And then she married one of the warriors, and then she gave birth to a son who was Quanah, who ended up being Quanah Parker. And when she was basically taken back into white civilization, she was basically a Comanche, even though, genetically she wasn't. And she never felt like she could integrate back into society. She was used to the nomadic Comanche lifestyle because that is how she was raised. She wanted the freedom. She didn't want to wear the clothing of the Americans or the Westerners or the whites. So I think it's interesting that, if you're raised in that lifestyle, even if you're from another culture, that can become the way you desire to live for the rest of your life.
That old nature versus nurture argument.
Yeah, well, and Cynthia Ann never did reintegrate. She basically starved herself to death. There was a battle where her husband was killed, and she was separated from her children, and they took her back to the family. And basically, once they took her back, she incessantly tried to run away, incessantly tried to escape, and then eventually died between malnutrition and a broken heart. There's a book called Empire of the Summer Moon, which is all about the rise and fall of the Comanche Empire, that is fantastic and talks about all that if anybody's interested.
I think that goes back to the whole nomadic lifestyle thing. Someone was brought up in a lifestyle where we're trying to settle and, create permanent, towns, and they're uprooted from that and raised in a totally different nomadic lifestyle and embraced it and could never go back. So interesting topic, could be explored in fiction, I think.
So when we talk about nomads in speculative fiction, they tend to be family groups or clan groups that travel with their wagons. Do you think that parallels when you see it in sci-fi? The only time I've seen sort of nomads were one man in a spaceship, traveling around looking for his new start. Do you see actual like wagon train type deals in sci-fi?
Well, I think Michael touched the Battlestar Galactica thing.
Okay.
Because you have the ragtag fugitive fleet trying to find this legendary Earth somewhere out there. So to me, in a sci-fi sense, that's what it might look like. To me.
Well, and you've got arc ships and colony ships where you've got the colonists who are taking off from Earth or whatever and heading out to another home. I mean, sometimes those in stories, you'll have generations that pass before they ever reach the colony. So you've got generations where they are in this mobile, the ship going out there, that eventually there's theoretically a home somewhere, but they're going to have to find a place and create it and do all of that. So then that's a lot like the pioneers with the wagons that went west. These are people going out to colonize other worlds to go find a new place, and they could be in space for who knows how long.
Yeah, Jawas, Junkers, and Miners are the big sci-fi nomads. I love pointing out the Jawas because they look like a caravan to me. Literally, they got the big crawler and they just troll across these deserts and pick up whatever scrap they can.
And the Tusken Raiders.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael? I know it's sometimes hard for you to jump in, so I'm going to try to call on you some more. What do you think nomads look like in a sci-fi setting?
I'm trying to avoid my own work at this point.
Oh, no problem. Hunter did it too. It's cool. We allow it here.
Me three. Go ahead.
Okay. So in the Scion Rising series, there are floating conglomerations of ships welded together called drifts, which are basically floating nomad cities that move through the various solar systems. And, they mine what asteroids come by you to go to the miners thing. They trade. They send out ships to hunt. In my universe, there are actual vacuum creatures that can be hunted for meat. We don't deal a lot with that, but they do exist. So, I mean, they're going to look like, for the drifts, they're basically big cities. The idea I got from Titan AE, from the books specifically, but they're also nomad factions that are merchant factions that go from planet to planet, just like any gypsy caravan. I don't think there's any reason not to have nomads of all three types. Right, you've got the gypsy or merchant type nomad fleets that fly together and in families that are either a bunch of separate ships or one conglomeration. You've got the ones that are going someplace like Battlestar Galactica. You've got the ones that don't know where they are, like Lost in Space. I think sci-fi is replete with opportunities to use all kinds of nomads.
So the modern
just in space, that doesn't even include alien planets.
The modern retake that was on Netflix for 4 seasons of Lost in Space actually specifically had family unit ships, and they at one point in time were traveling together. So that is an interesting take on it. Now, you've written in the Starflight universe, which was a video game from back in the day.
Yep.
Would you consider that a nomad tale?
For the most part, I'm going to have to say no for Starflight, because they were always going back to Arth because it was the only space station where you could trade at. So they had a stable home base. It was more of an exploration game.
Okay. Jana, sorry. Hunter, you look like you were going to say something. Jump in.
Oh, I was going to throw in my top pick for nomads in space, I'd say Guardians of the Galaxy, the Ravagers, like the space pirates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, and same thing, pirates on the high sea. You could do that with space ravagers. You can have traditional pirates in historical fiction. Airship captains. Go
Ooh.
steampunk with it, and you get the airship captains that they just tool around and they take people around. They do all that kind of stuff. It's so much fun because it's this idea, but it translates really, really well to a lot of different settings because it's wanting that life that is free of the encumberment of being settled down, or that life where they're going someplace.
And away from governments.
Yeah, there's often a lot of that in there where they don't want to be part of the settled down government. They want to figure out their own setup. And that can be fun to write and fun to read too, is how do they work? Because, do you get the Khan, who is now the warlord and he's in charge of everybody? Do you have individual family groups? Do you have just kind of a general recognized, we're all going this way? Do you have a chief? You can do all sorts of interesting hierarchies or lack thereof that work with the way that they see things. What is status? And a lot of times there was one that I read once, and status was all about how fat you were, because if you were able to get enough food that you could actually be fat, it showed how successful your ideas and the things that you did were. And so it was kind of this fun thing where, beauty and all of those desirability was all the things we complain about now, where we're like, oh yeah, me and my fat belly, whatever. And they're like, no, that would have been ideal then, because it showed that your husband could provide for you well enough that you could be curvaceous. And say, that's an interesting turn on what do you value.
Well, that makes me the king, so I'm going to take it.
There you go.
So that's an interesting take. I like the idea where you can compare the two, where the nomadic peoples butt up against the people that exist in one place, even if it's temporary. Because I do think that it's that clash of cultures leads to organic conflict that can be fun to explore.
Okay, here's one for you that would be fun though. Oh, Jesse, we can't hear you.
How about now?
A little better.
Okay, so I'll get louder. We touched
earlier on settlers and how settlers, at least in some way, they resemble nomads. But a huge driver throughout history for the way that people moved was what we were talking about, like with governments or other conquering peoples. Through the vast majority of human history, someone else has driven someone out of somewhere and sent them off into the next frontier. We talk about the Puritans for America, for where most of us are from, and how they were driven by governmental or religious changes to move into the New World. That drives colonization of North America. The thing is that our planet is now lacking those spaces for the most part. The vast majority of the world is now conquered, and the places that aren't are little mini spots that are super dangerous or super difficult to live in. So the next advancement of that is into space. So if you don't like home and you're willing to take the risk, you're going to drive yourself off into the next frontier, which is being Elon Musk and trying to figure out how a rocket works.
So they've actually done studies on that, and the existence of the escape valve for society that the West, in parentheses, gave societal stability, because the people that are perpetually unhappy, that want to new things, want to do things differently or do it their own way, they had somewhere to go to get that. I don't like it here, I'm going to take my ball and go home. And that existed up until we got to the New World and then pushed west, and there was nowhere west left to go. And there has been psychological reports that say one of the problems with modern society is the lack of that escape valve for culture, which is where, space colonization comes from. I mean, the concept for a lot of that is the idea that, well, I think in The Expanse, they used the Mormons were trying to get away from prosecution. So they had the space Mormons that built their, was that?
We do that.
Well, I mean, I just use it as an example because it was in pop fiction. But I mean, there could have been any number of reasons. I've seen it where certain Islamic nations said, we don't like the way you're interpreting the Quran. We're going to go and, colonize over here. I've seen all religions can do it. I don't even think it needs to be religious. It could be political. I mean, who doesn't love the People's Republic of Proxima Centauri? I've used it, but other people have too. Like, the idea that it has to be religious, I don't think is there. I think anything that makes you want to live differently.
Yeah, I mean, so you have gypsies in Eastern Europe, right? So, everything's settled. There's towns or cities, but you have these people that are, not integrated in the rest of society, living a separate culture, a separate life, moving around, doing their own thing, persecuted often. And I think that also is interesting fodder for, fiction.
That was something I really actually, going back to the Wheel of Time, what I really liked about Robert Jordan's take on like the Roma or gypsies, because he was able to push away from some of those stereotypes, like these people will come into town and steal your children and curse you and leave. Like, he had a really gentle take. And I feel like fiction, like speculative fiction, lets people explore ideas going beyond some of those stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, one place that did that was Joe Vasicek wrote his, I forget the name of that series. I can picture the cover. The whole point was they realized that there weren't enough people at any one space station to prevent genetic stagnation, so that the young men, when they came of age, they would take their dad's spaceship and then they would travel and trade until they found a family, and then they'd start somewhere else. So the genes were constantly spreading outward. And I do think that kind of works too, because if you look at like a Stargate, they always go into the city that's only got like a couple hundred, sometimes a dozen people on it. Which, if you
have to fight to the death for the space harem,
absolutely,
forget it.
Although he came close to a harem in his space harems. I mean, there's a whole genre. It could be done. They make lots of money.
They really do.
But no, I think like the idea of genetic diversity could be just another reason to have some of that nomadic stuff, because they've done reports on the amount of different genetic starting points you would need to maintain a healthy society. And it's way more than you see in most of these shows, like the Stargates or whatever, where the town has like 100 people, right? Like, they're going to inbreed in no time. Everybody will be related. So anyway, I do think it's lots of fascinating cultural aspects you can turn on your head with nomads. Do you guys have a favorite trope that you would like to see paired with your nomads? And we'll start with you, Michael. You've been a little too quiet. I don't think I like this. You need to talk.
Actually, I had my hand up, but you guys are busy. So I'm going to reverse just a little bit back to cultural release valves. You've got the people that are going out to get away from the life they've got, and then finding out that everybody works in a nomad caravan. Nobody gets to be baggage. And I think that's kind of accentuated and at the same time flipped on its head by the mythos of Wing Commander, where the pilgrims kept moving and then started evolving, back to your limited breeding pool, into new abilities because they only wanted to be on the move. And then, of course, the people in the back just said, well, they're not natural, which goes back to your gypsies. Well, they're not natural. I mean, it's better out there until you get out there and realize you got to work all the time. And then once you're working all the time and successful, you're no longer natural. There's just a lot of cultural pretzel in that.
I like it. Okay. So
now, if I didn't answer your other question, I can do that too, but I forgot.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you if you would.
Okay. So which ones do I, can I have the question again? I'm sorry.
So they're obviously, one of the cool things about a nomadic story is it would allow you, because it's a different way of looking at the world, to take some of the fun tropes we might like and turn them on their head. Which kind of trope would you like to work into a nomadic story?
I think I would have to go with something regarding the nomads and the explorers that are going out, being forced at a certain point by a certain mechanism to come back and bring their skills and their genetics back to the otherwise dwindling settler population. Something like, an attack, a plague, an army, a war, and now the home base that we nomaded away, left to become nomads, can't survive without us.
Okay. I like the idea of having to come back. Another trope that could be fun, and then we'll let the rest of you jump in, is in a lot of them you see the wise old mentor. If you've got a nomad group that are like salvagers, because that's one of the popular concepts in sci-fi, then you have a situation where maybe the young people are actually better at the tech, right? Just because, how often do you see people like get your kids to fix your phone, right? So I think that's one trope you can almost turn on its head in sci-fi if you have the young one is suddenly the tech expert because they don't know what's not possible. So they do things because no one told them they couldn't when it comes to tech. I don't think I've ever seen that used that way. The closest I've seen in fiction would be Terry Mixon's Empire of Bones when they were exploring the new technology, but they weren't nomads. So it's not a perfect parallel. What about the rest of you? What kind of tropes would you like to see in your nomadic fiction?
I would like to turn around. So normally a nomadic source of living is considered and I mean this from a wealth perspective, a poorer source of living, right? So you're living off the wild, you're living off what you can scrounge. I would at some point like to play with having very well-to-do or well-off nomads, space traders that are constantly engaging in new planets and new technologies and new wealth, coming home and finding out that their home is a dump, that the place that their ancestors came from is just like held together with bubble gum and duct tape, and everybody's broke.
Okay, I like it. Jana, Shane, Hunter, anything you want to add in?
Well, one that I'm working with, and I hope it comes together the way I hope it will, is when the nomads aren't human. So I am working with griffins that have been driven from their eyries by changes in the weather, and they can't stay there. And so now they're looking for someplace else, which runs you right into the dumb humans that are, in their cities and everything else. And they're not dealing well with gigantic eagle cats from above. So, but to take that and say nomadic doesn't only have to be a human culture. We can have aliens like the Jawas too. And in fantasy, we don't see that very often where we take the non-human creatures and make them into our nomadic groups. So I'm playing with those ideas. What happens when it's the creatures and not the people?
I've seen where they have the elves as almost nomadic because they're, sort of nature worshiping. So like the woodland elves constantly moving.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've seen elves that way and sometimes like goblins. But yeah, taking it to monsters and mythical creatures as the nomads.
What about you, Shane? Any tropes you like to throw into your nomadic sci-fi?
Yeah, I'm a big Battlestar Galactica geek. I think everybody picked up on that. But maybe you have the defeated space fleet who is trying to run off into the stars, no direction, just trying to eke out a survival, on vessels that weren't designed to hold people forever. They're warships, and they patch them together and go from star system to star system, scrounging food and fuel and whatever they need just to eke by an existence, just to survive. Maybe their home system was destroyed by this, alien entity that wants to wipe out humanity. So there's no going back. They just have to go find someplace.
So Disney Star Wars did what you suggested with the defeated fleet fleeing and starting their own thing with the First Order. They just executed it poorly, but the idea itself had merit. So I could see something like that working. I mean, that's one of the things at the end of every even, historic war is you got to get the actual armies to surrender, because if they take to the hills, the war might be over, but the fighting lasts another decade or two. I mean, look what you can see. A modern example is the Japanese that didn't surrender because they didn't believe it was over. So you had guys that were still in their 70s and they kept, hit and run on the locals that are, 30 years after the war ended or whatever.
Absolutely. So that would be kind of the direction I might like to explore.
All right. What about you, Hunter? If you were going to throw some tropes into your into sci-fi nomads.
Oh, sci-fi. So I was just thinking nomads.
Okay, we'll answer that way.
Actually, I like being able to blend sci-fi and fantasy concepts. Like, to toot my own horn, I took nomads and a farmer boy, actually a farmer girl, to come up with my migratory farmers. It was the idea of you don't see plants as a big focus in nomadic life. So what if these people towed along greenhouses on wheels, and it's like a specialty crop? And that turned out to be a lot of fun. I'd love to see people play with, I guess, some cross-genre tropes.
Okay. I like that. So is there anything about nomads that we didn't cover that you think is a fun question that we could throw before we wrap this up? Anybody want anything they want to throw in at the last moment?
Oh, we could talk about this for hours.
I know. That's why I had to.
I think the only thing that is a really huge one that we haven't talked about much is with nomadic cultures, there is usually a really, really strong tie with whatever animals they're using, because you get a lot of nomadic cultures that walk. And so in that case, it's different. But dogs take on a completely different thing when you're using them for hunting, you're using them for safety, you're using them for protection, all that kind of thing. The way that you think about a horse when you are nomadic, and if the horse goes lame, you are so phenomenally screwed. So it is interesting the relationship that happens there between people and animals, because that changes how far you're able to go as a nomad if you've got horses versus if you're all walking or if you're using wagons. So there's also things to think about with your mode of transportation. So if you could use dragons and that was the way that you nomaded, that would be a completely different kind of thing than riding horses or walking. So there's another thing to toss out there, is that relationship between how do you do the travel and what does that mean as far as animals or your ship or that thing you're connected to.
With animals comes the need to feed them, which can, I mean, if
you're talking about their shit.
Yeah, well, if you're moving, dragon poop. But if you're moving, it's not your problem. You just leave it and move on. Fertilizer.
That's an excellent point.
Fertilizer. Buffalo chips.
And with sci-fi, once we add sci-fi elements in, then we bring in genetic engineering. I'm working on a short right now that is cattlemen, but everything has been genetically engineered to make that entire thing more efficient, where this whole planet can basically provide beef to half the galaxy. So the cows are basically oryx from history, from wild cattle that are all rhino-sized. So they ride giant wolves because the wolves are much more efficient at tracking and keeping these massive cows in line. Even the rabbits are scaled up. Everything has been engineered to make that work better. And I think that would be really fun to play with on a larger scale, is how would genetic capable nomads or a society that has those capabilities, what would a nomad look like then?
CRISPR meets space nomad. I like it. So that is an interesting question. I think that could be kind of fun as well. I think anytime you throw genetic engineering in there, you can play with all kinds of deep philosophical issues, and like the meaning of what is human at that point in time becomes something you can dive into. Are you playing God? So you add that to nomadic people, and it's recipe for an interesting story. So anybody else have anything you want to throw in before I let everyone give their socials and tell people how they can track you down?
How about colonizing nomads? The best example I can think of is Moana. A bunch of people that go out exploring, find an island, drop a small colony, and keep moving.
Yeah. So that could be an interesting way to do it. I like it. I like colonization stories. It's popular for a reason, exploring the unknown. So, all right. So as we wrap this up, first I will tell you, dear listener, that there's probably a lot more topics within this one that we could cover. So if anything pops out you want us to dive in deeper, post it in the comment section, email us at the show, whatever you got to do, and we can dive deeper. Unfortunately, a lot of these topics, you kind of have to scatter shot in broad terms in the beginning so you can then narrow things down. And with that, I would also like to remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part. And with that, Jesse, what are you writing right now?
So I am working on that Space Cowboy short. I'm working on way too many projects at once because that just actually helps my creative process. I'm working on my own little world that I will hopefully expand to other authors. That's basically transdimensional heist. Everybody meets at a bar. They gather a group together of everything from magic-capable cavemen to your best cybernetic street warriors. You get everybody you need together, and then you go off to raid hell itself. I'm working on all kinds of stuff like that. And as far as where people can find me, you can find me on Instagram. It's my full name, Jesse James Fain. My website is outlawauthor.com. You can also find me on Substack, again, under Outlaw Author or Jesse James Fain. You can find me on Reddit as Outlaw Author as well, though most of my free stories from there are moving over to Substack. So get signed up. But yeah, you can find me in any of those places.
So your creative process is basically creative ADD. Look, a squirrel.
Yeah, kind of. I if I get hung up, it's a lot easier for me to jump over to something I'm not hung up on. It lets me put words out way faster. So I don't have to just sit there and stare. I can move to a different project for a little bit, and then something will click for the other story, and I'll be on my way.
I have to say that the rest of us are all jealous of your name because it was like prenatal. Your mother was already considering branding for you for your writing career, and my mother did not gift me with that. Like,
yeah, that was Dad.
It was just so perfect for you. So, well, we like your dad then because he hooked you up with the marketing. So if we get the time machine, maybe he could go back and help my mom pick a name that would make marketing a little easier too. All right, Jana, what are you writing, and then how can they find you?
I'm currently hopefully finishing up. But by the time this gets closer, I'm working on an urban fantasy series. It is set in supernatural Denver, with a woman who is a fallen holy warrior, just trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life now, which mostly means that she's turned into a thief. So it's a fun one. I like working with Denver. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from where I live. And it also means that I have a hellhound that lives under Coors Field. So I get to talk about baseball, which is one of my favorite things. So I'm doing that. And you can find me at opalkingdompress.com or all over the internet and the social medias and the Amazon under Jana S Brown or under Jena Rey or under a bunch of other things we're not going to talk about tonight.
So if you were wondering what your fallen paladin was going to do, she could just open her very own Dr. Pepper bar, and get a slice of life story. I'm just saying. I mean, you could do coffee because you don't drink it, but, maybe a Dr. Pepper soda bar or something.
Yeah, she's got the problem of, technically she's dead. So yeah, she mentions the whole thing that to be a burger flipper, you got to have a social security number, and hers is not valid anymore. So she has to figure out better ways to pay the rent.
I would think we had gotten past the point of discriminating against the undead. We can do better, people.
Not undead. She's just dead on paper.
All right. What about you, Shane? What are you writing at the moment, and then how can they find you?
Yeah, so my new project is Space Mercenaries. We got a guy who's trying to find his way after the big war's over. But there's all sorts of chaos in its wake. So he's building a new company, a private military contractor, so that he can go out into the stars and make his fortune doing the thing that he loves, which is fighting. So that's what I'm working on right now. And if you want to find me, I've got this Facebook group. It's Shane's Rally Point. Come check us out. We mostly put up dumb memes about military type of stuff. It's pretty silly. We're a goofy bunch. It's a lot of fun. Come join us.
And I'm not saying that I steal memes from Shane, but I'm not saying it either is what I'm telling you.
I'm just saying it's a target-rich environment over there. Just come on by.
And when I have a really good meme that I didn't steal from him, I do tag him. So I'm like, hey, you can steal this from me because, I got to balance the scales a little bit.
I appreciate you giving us credit.
Absolutely. All right, Michael. So what are you writing at the moment, and then how can we find you on the interwebs?
Okay, so the basic finding me, and I'm doing this first for a reason, is deliriousscribbles.com. That name should tell you that I'm kind of all over the place like Jesse. I've got a new middle-aged superhero series coming out called Mom Atomic. I've got a Legally Blonde meets Scooby-Doo urban fantasy called Taco Truck Timmy. That's basically a wannabe Hallmark character who ends up fighting supernatural creatures. Plus the Scion Rising remaster, my new SF lit RPG, my new Isekai epic fantasy, and the new Guns of Underhill should be coming out soon, and that's 19th century alternate history epic fantasy. As you know, books, find my books anywhere quality books are sold.
So does this mean that when you go to the taco truck, you can get a tax write-off because it's research for your books?
Yes.
Oh, freaking standing. I think you cracked the secret to the universe, sir.
And good tacos.
And good tacos. All right. What about you, Hunter? What are you writing at the moment, and then where can listeners and viewers at home find you?
Oh, man. When this airs, my second book, Stitching Power, will be out for about a week. So if anyone wants to check out something fun, it's nomads get stuck in a lowland and have to fund their way to get back out. So this guy has to work in a women's only sewing factory with magic, and they don't want him there.
That can be interesting. I worked as a data processing when I first got out of the Army while I was going through the VA claims process. The supported employment program at the VA helps you find jobs, and they put me in this where I was literally the only guy. I thought construction workers and grunts could be crude. Oh my goodness, those office ladies, when they didn't remember I was there, I was blushing. So there's a fertile environment for you right there, Hunter, with the dialogue.
Oh yeah, I took it from my mom's experiences working in a sewing factory. She said, "Do you know what they said?"
I mean, you almost got to sit there with your Urban Dictionary out just so you can look up what the young kids are saying.
Oh goodness. And my next project that I'll be hopefully about halfway through when this airs is my nomads will reach an island where two people accidentally get married and shenanigans happen.
Wait, accidentally
I have to have the feels.
Accidentally.
Shenanigans are good.
How does one accidentally get married?
I mean, different culture. You don't know.
Fair.
Pretty much someone can't read. Like you throw in illiteracy and you get to have fun. Like, what's this contract? I don't know. Sure, I'll sign it.
That sounds like my marriage currently. Interesting.
So you tricked her or she tricked you?
Oh, it's a long story.
Wasn't that the plot of a Firefly episode? Mal getting married by accident?
See, they come back because it's good. Anyway, you can find me at hunterkwallace.com. You can find me on Facebook, Hunter K Wallace, and sometimes Hunter Coles Wallace. Coles with a C. And yeah, and you can find me here.
And you don't have to worry about spelling her name because it's all in the show notes. I did all the work for you, which basically means I pestered them until they gave me all of their social media links. So click the show notes, let it expand, and let your fingers do some exploring for authors you might not have read yet. And with that, you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the bits, shoots, the rumbles, the YouTube, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. More importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. And I promise we will get proof of life from her soon. If nothing else, she is going to be there for the spooky season episodes because that's like her life. She loves horror. She would move into those worlds if she could. I mean, happy endings aren't a requirement for her. With that, you also can find us on our email at blastersbladepodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersbladepodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only. Or you can go to our website over there. It's on Spotify, but it's gobbledygook. Thank you, Spotify. I'm still not over it, by the way, if you haven't noticed. But if you go to the Linktree, you can find it and get the address where you don't have to say all the weird letters and numbers. And once you're there, you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, and every penny helps. Or you could support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast. And I promise I will keep my co-host drinking some of that coffee brand coffee spiced apple cider, which I'm just going to assume they do again this year. And so, like I said, it'll go towards keeping them caffeinated. And if you want to try some of that coffee brand coffee, link is in the show notes. Code is podcast Grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win. It's an American company employing American citizens for business, not a drop shipping outfit. So if that matters to you, shopping local, which it does for me, that this is a company where you could do that with, which I think is pretty cool. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my absentee and insane co-host, I am J.R. Handley. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. This was a lot of fun. We appreciate you coming back for your second episode, Hunter. Hopefully we didn't scare you away, and we might get episode 3 out of you. And you too, Shane. I think this is like your 3rd episode, so hopefully you decide to grace us with your presence again.
Number 3. That's right.
Hey,
I hope so.
All right. Oh, and you too, Michael. We always love having you.
I know. Because you can make all the faces at me you want. I can't see them. Hunter, I was actually trying to support your idea as a good one, because it is a good one.
Oh, thanks. Which one?
All of them.
The accidental marriage thing.
Oh, great.
I got the impression that I had been taken the wrong way, and I apologize for that. But
you're fine.
Yeah. Well, I can't see reactions, so I got
everyone loves it. They don't know they do, but they do.
So the next time you come back, Michael, we'll make a point of calling you on, so you don't have to worry about stepping over people, because we do like your thoughts, and I do realize that on a panel you're at a slight disadvantage with so many people wanting to jump in. So we will fix that going forward. Well,
I tried to raise my finger, so I guess I didn't raise it high enough. Maybe that'll work too.
I didn't even think to look for that, but now we know. We're all learning people. So if you've got ideas on how to make it easier for Michael, or you just want to make fun of us, we're cool with all of it. So like I said, join us next week, same bad time, same bad channel. And with that, I'm going to hit the end button.